Bob here, Chopper Bob Customs. First off, let me thank you for watching the video. Appreciate all of you that do watch the videos. Appreciate you that have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so now. Hit that like button. If you got any comments, please leave them in the comment section. You got any questions or anything that needs my response, I usually try and respond in a timely manner on those. And hit that notification bell. I was hoping to have been posting videos on a more regular basis. Life happens. We've had some family medical issues that aren't severe, fortunately, but they do require time and attention. And then the weather hasn't been very cooperative, and just life in general. So, but today I'm back on, it's going to be a short video today, I think. Probably a lot of music because I'm going to speed up a lot of it. Back on the 56 Chevy. What's happened in the meantime since the last video, we originally were going to put the copper gaskets in this that have the built-in fire ring. When we got them on the heads, we found out that the heads, the combustion chambers, had been moved out a little bit. I think it was when they were grinding the valves. So the bore size on the gasket was not sufficient for the heads. I believe it was sufficient for the block, but not the combustion chamber in the head. So we went with a larger one, and at the advice of SCE, we went with the Vulcans, which are basically a composite gasket that has a stainless steel fire ring that's separate from the gasket. In checking the largest bore that they had against the cylinder heads, it didn't necessarily provide the full 10,000ths of an inch that they want, but it had a positive clearance instead of a negative clearance, so I figured that's going to have to be good enough. However, in evaluating it, I realized that there was probably no way, with the engine sitting in the car or with the deck at 45 degrees to the ground, and with me trying to wrestle a head in there on studs, that those rings were going to stay in place. And I did a quick check on the internet, and sure enough, you need to have the deck parallel to the ground when you're setting the heads down on that to prevent the ring from sliding out and damaging the composite gasket. So then the dominoes started to fall. Pulled the engine out, and it's like, well, if we're pulling the engine out, we really should take a look at a couple of the rod bearings. And the first thing that we saw when we started taking it apart was that the cam and lifters is starting to go away. And I'll show you what we're talking about here. This is probably the worst case of spalling that we had. I don't know whether you can see that or not, but basically what has happened is that the cam has started to shear away material on the face of the lifter, and this lifter would probably have a concave surface and the lobe would be flat. Probably it may be flat now. It's kind of hard to tell with it in the block still, but that was the one that was spalled the worst. And then we had one where the spalling, let's see if I can find it real quick here. Let's see here. Yeah, I think this is it. The spalling was not as bad, but it's starting to cut a groove in it. So there was probably some debris in the engine that started to cut a groove in it. I thought there was one that was worse than that. I might have been mistaken on that. But then the one that really kind of put it to the point where we realized that we had serious problems was this was not circular in nature. It actually had longitudinal grooves cut in it, which is probably indicative that this lifter had stopped rotating, which meant that it was probably going to flatten that lobe very quickly. And that lobe does have a scar on it with it still in the car. I didn't check the lift on it to see how they were doing, because basically when you see lifters like this, you're not going to have a good camshaft. It may not be completely bad now, but probably within the matter of maybe a couple hundred miles, this cam is going to be junk. And so with that, we knew we were going to have to put cam lifters in it. And so then, give me just a second here. I need to... By the way, this engine has got Eagle H-beam rods in it. It's got main studs. It is a 2-bolt main block, but you know, it's got some good stuff in it. But as we'll see in a couple of minutes, it just wasn't necessarily done all that well. I gotta get this off the register. And this was the better of the two. This was number 3, which was one of the ones that the head gasket blew on. But and I don't know how well this is going to come through, but there is just a ton of scoring. And there's bright spots, most probably caused either by debris. We know that it had a rocker arm break at one point in time. It's got one replacement rocker arm on it, so it could be he had magnets on the oil filter to try and capture the steel parts, but I'm sure that there were probably aluminum parts that have embedded themselves in this. And then also on the backside, it's not severe, I've seen worse, but we're starting to get some shininess on the backside of the bearing shell, which kind of means that this bearing was probably just starting to move around. And here again, with the scoring of the cylinder walls, with the camshaft and lifters, with the scoring and bright spots in the bearings, with it looking like it's starting to wear on the backside of the shell of the bearing. I mean, this engine needs to come apart, have all the crud cleaned out of it, go to a machine shop to have measurements taken on the big ends of the rod journals, or of the rods. Actually, well, the journals as well. These bearings are, let me see here. If I remember correctly, these are standard bearings. Yeah, these are standard bearings. So the crank's standard. I'm assuming that the mains are standard as well. So it would be easy to go 1010 on this crank. From the conditions of the crank, this might be a candidate actually for rotating assembly. Sell the rods to somebody else and put a 496 rotating assembly in it. But basically, at the end of the day, I talked to the customer about it, and it just does not make sense to put this engine back together, particularly with an 871 BDS blower on it. It's not going to hold up. And you spend time and money doing this, and you put it together, and the next thing you know, you're spinning a rod bearing, the camshaft's flat, you know, it's knocking. It's just not a good scenario. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to torque these bolts. I believe they're supposed to be 63 foot-pounds, but that's it with ARP lube on them. I'm not going to open up an ARP package for 4 rod bolts. I'm just going to put a note on the engine that the number 3 and the number 4 rods are not torqued correctly. And because there's, like I said, cam shot. In a second here, well, let me stop doing that and show you. Let me pause this. In addition to all that, you know, probably a third of the pickup screen was blocked with debris. A lot of it is silicone. I mean, they had a lot of this thing glued together really, really good with silicone. And but there's some metal in there. And then the one thing that I found in the bottom of the pan, in the debris at the bottom of the pan, of course, I didn't go sifting through it because that milkshake is just horrible stuff. But I did come across something that, you know, basically when I was mopping it out with a rag, I felt this and I thought, well, that's a pretty big chunk of the blown up rocker arm. Well, shoot, it's not the rocker arm at all. It is a stinking keyway that was in the bottom of the pan. I mean, if you're assembling an expensive engine like this and you drop something in the pan like this right here, now granted, what is the chances of something like this getting in the way or getting up into the engine? Well, if it does, it's catastrophic. And so if you get something like this in the pan, you take the pan off and find it and pull it out of the engine. You don't just leave it in there. You know, if this was a daily driver that you're going to be revving up to maybe 3,000, 3,500 RPM, and you're going to get groceries with it and not doing anything severe with it, well, maybe. But when you're putting together an expensive engine like this, and like I said, this has got H-beam rods in it, it's got studs on the mains, it's obviously been balanced. I think at one point there's actually, this is most probably a Mallory weight that they put in it back here. You just don't do stuff like this. At least not in my book. If you're doing this kind of stuff, set the tools down and step away from the vehicle. That's all I got to say. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it around so I can get this last rocker adjusting nut on there, and then bolt the valve covers on it. You may be wondering why I'm doing this, since this engine obviously needs to be gone through. Well, at the end of the day, he's probably going to shove it underneath the workbench someplace, and it's going to sit there for a couple years. And one day he's going to go, you know what, I need to build that 454, and he goes to drag it out. And if all the parts are here, he doesn't have to go hunting through boxes and Tupperware and who knows what else, peanut butter jars, trying to find the pieces to put it back together. As a for instance, when I took this engine apart, there were only 31 of the stud washers in it. They had just run one of the nuts down on the head, which is a no-no, a definite no-no. You need to have those hardened washers in there to maintain the torque setting and to not damage the head, not damage the nut. And fortunately, Rockin' Robin had a pile of the hardened washers over at his place, and so I bumped one off of him. But if you have one like this, in my opinion, and it's just the way I look at things, is that if you can have it sort of together, even if you need to rob parts, say like he decides he needs to get a set of rocker arms, and he knows he's got 15 of one type on this engine and one of another type, he can go pull the rocker arms off of this and put it on a different engine. He knows they're all there with the poly locks and all of that. So at any rate, that's why I put it back together. I'll probably go ahead and put the plugs in it so the mud daubers, which is the, I think it's the Oklahoma State bird, they don't get in there. And then it'll go back to him today, and I'm going to... It will be going back to him tomorrow, and he's going to be bringing over I think a dynoed out at 400 horsepower crate engine, small block. We're going to go with a small block in the car. That's why I took the motor mounts off of this, is because I can put it on the small block. I'm assuming we're going to be going back with the 4-speed, and then of course I'll have brackets and all that I'll have to sort out. He says he's got a set of headers that I may have to modify because of the way they did the steering on this car. But yeah, so that will probably be the next video I shoot, is getting the small block in here and some of the challenges of converting over from the big block to the small block. So with that being said, again, thanks for watching. Please like the video. If you got any comments about what I've done here today, let me know. One thing, I am going to put a tag on this telling folks that the rockers aren't adjusted, there's no head gaskets in it, there's no oil pan gaskets in it, and that the number 3 and number 4 rods don't have the bolts torqued, and it needs to be rebuilt before it is put back in the car. So of course if he takes that off, I mean, that's up to him, but when it leaves here, I want people to know that it's not a junk engine, but it's on its way to being a junk engine if somebody doesn't do some serious work to it. And he's just not ready to do that at this point in time. And I understand it. I mean, it's expensive, and with this car, every time I turn around, I find something new that needs to be addressed. So anyway, with that said, thanks again for watching, and for now, Chopper Bob, out.